Environmental Commission meeting to order at 7:01. Matt, will you please call roll?
I will. Commissioner Graham. Here. Commissioner Hutton.
Here.
Councilperson Ann Bannister. Commissioner Skinner. Here. Commissioner Morocco. Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Slavic.
Here.
Commissioner Mursky.
Here.
Commissioner Hanna. Commissioner Gibrandel.
Here.
Commissioner Needham.
Here.
Commissioner Apple.
Here.
Commissioner Rigo. You have a quorum.
All right, excellent. We have a draft of tonight's agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to it? All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Commissioner Skinner, second. Commissioner Gibrandel. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. We also have a draft of the minutes from the October 26th meeting. Are there any corrections or questions about the meeting minutes? All right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
One correction,
Yes?
I was here.
Oh, that's right, you came in late, but you still get
Yes.
credit.
Thank you.
As amended,
Fix that.
is there a motion to approve the October minutes as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second? Commissioner Skinner, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Minutes are approved. Would anyone here tonight like to offer public comment? If you would, please come forward to the microphone.
State your name and address.
I'm Dan Ezekiel, the 523 4th Street. Thanks for the opportunity to address you tonight. When I spoke to you last in December of 2016, we were at the rock bottom that we had been in decades of our city's recycling program. I want to thank you for, at that time, wisely recommending that council grant the interim Murph contract to Recycle Ann Arbor. Murph is the materials recovery facility. It's where the recyclables go after they get picked up in the trucks. RAA is now indeed receiving Ann Arbor's recyclables at the Murph. They're no longer being baled, unsorted, and shipped out of state and then unbaled and resorted. Now the recyclables are being loose loaded, and the large amount of glass that city residents recycle is being reprocessed into glass and fiberglass. We still have a long way to go, and our MRF is still unusable for processing recyclables, but at least now the trajectory is upward. I think it's wonderful that our city has climate goals, and maybe now even a mechanism to partly pay for them after the county millage has passed. I'm an avid supporter of renewable energy, but I also want us to remember that recycling and composting are robust contributors to reducing the city's carbon footprint. And that's a fact that we sometimes forget. And just for example, a 50% increase in Ann Arbor's diversion rate would have the same effect as installing solar arrays on almost 2,000 homes, and it would take us 25% of the way to achieving the city's 2025 greenhouse gas reduction goals. And that 50% increase in diversion is very eminently doable, and it's doable with infrastructure and goodwill that we already have in place. We've got a long way to go to restore our recycling and composting programs to their former national class standard. Though the city authorized hiring a new staff member for recycling over a year ago and budgeted for it, this still hasn't happened and doesn't appear to be in the works. City staff proposed making major changes in how the city's collection service is conducted, but we haven't made any progress towards a new solid waste plan to guide such a change. The city talks about creating a regional authority to build a new MRF, which is a good idea. But meanwhile, the current MRF, representing an investment of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money, languishes uselessly because it's been allowed to become so dilapidated. Optimistically, it will take 5 years to build a new MRF. Are we going to continue to have to ship recyclables out of state in the meantime? Aren't there ways we can invest in the current MRF to do at least some processing here? This city has long said it would put a winter organics collection pilot in place. Can you?
You can continue.
Sorry.
I'm almost done. The city has long said it would put a winter organics collection pilot in place. This winter, once again, there is no pilot, and there doesn't seem to be any plan for a pilot next winter or any winter. And this is despite kind of a clamor and a willingness from various institutions to participate in that pilot. And in particular, Ba Elementary School really wants to participate in that pilot. And Commissioner Hanna can maybe fill you in on some of that drama. And that school is operating heroically to keep all their organics on site all winter long until they can be picked up in the spring, and this is the second year that that's happened. What should be our next steps? Comprehensive planning with an eye toward climate goals should direct our city's solid waste operations, not the other way around. Let's plan a comprehensive waste reduction strategy and use it to guide our solid waste operations. Let's press to hire the staff member for the recycling position that the city has long authorized. Let's make a plan to get the existing Murph at least partially working, at the very minimum, baling corrugated cardboard on site to sell locally. That's a move which would net the city tens of thousands of dollars per month and also reduce the carbon footprint of our recycling program through reduced truck miles. Let's get the winter organics pilot going this winter and look at how to enforce the commercial recycling ordinance that's already in place. These steps will help us begin our long climb back toward national leadership in solid waste reduction and also to meet our climate goals. Let me know how I can help. And thank you for your service, and thank you for letting me speak to you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jan Wright. I'm the chair of the Climate Change and Earth Care Task Force for Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice. Some of you have heard me speak before. As you know, some of you know, food waste and climate change is one of the issues we've been working the most on in the last few years. Several of us were on the CB&I task, the two committees that they had for citizens' involvement when they were working on the organics management plan. We enjoyed that and learned a lot, and we're disappointed that nothing seems to have happened as far as anybody implementing any of that plan. We've actually been moving ahead ourselves with a possible pilot program that in a very small way will increase composting and recycling in Ann Arbor if we are awarded a neighborhood partnership grant, which we've been talking to various people, and we're almost ready, I think, to submit something for that. We're also interested in larger city and regional solid waste issues, including recycling, even though food waste and composting is our major thing. It all is all important, as the former speaker said, and all highly relevant to dealing with climate change. And I know less about that, but I know that we have been aware, and we did make comments on the county's solid waste plan a few months ago, and I believe that the city's solid waste plan is up for another five-year plan sometime soon. We really hope that the city and county can work together, both in the short term and the long term. We know that a big change is going to take time, and in the meantime, we hope that there'll be some good planning and thinking about things that can be good for the climate, and that all of that planning will be open and inclusive of a lot of public input. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Stephen Brown. I live at 1507 Shadford Road in Ann Arbor. And this is my first attendance here at the Environmental Commission. And I'm a member of the Sierra Club, and I just would like to say that we are, our membership would like to help the commission and the city to implement better solid waste handling in the city. You know, Ann Arbor has a reputation, or had a reputation, as being a leader in this field, but over the last number of years it seems to have slipped a bit, and we'd like to help resolve that. So thank you for your attention and your time.
Thank you. All right. Let's move on, if there's no one else to give comment. Let's move on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the commission? Commissioner Murph.
Thank you. I'd like to give an update on the work of the metrics subcommittee for everybody's benefit. That was a committee that was set up jointly between the Energy and the Environmental Commissions. Commissioner Hutton, myself, Matt Naud, Allison Skinner, Josh McDonald, Sarah Palig from the Energy Commission, and I worked on that committee. We presented our recommendations briefly, or Josh, I should say, did several months ago. The Energy Commission is going to work on those recommendations in our December meeting, which is on the 12th, and in discussions with Commissioner Hutton, Chair Hutton, we've agreed that we will also take up those recommendations in our January meeting. Our intent is to focus on solid waste because of the comments that we've heard and concerns we've also heard and expressed by commissioners here. What we also would like to do, though, is to review the other recommendations and at least act on those where there's recommendations to replace some of the dashboard metrics with metrics that we feel, which we feel are not very good, with better metrics. That doesn't mean that we're going to spend a lot of focus on those or resources on those, but we would like to update the dashboard or at least make recommendations to do that to the city and staff so that we have better metrics that are posted on the A2Gov site. So as I said, the Energy Commission will take a first stab at this, looking primarily at energy metrics, and then our intent is to do that in January. I will send out or have Josh send out an update, or not an update, but the overview of the recommendations so that you can take a look at those again before the January meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, then, let's move on to new business. We have an update from staff about solid waste. And I want to thank you in advance for all of the work you put into this and for taking the time to come and talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Creston Slatton, the manager of the Systems Planning Unit. I'm going to be going through the presentation that staff has put together to provide updates in the solid waste program areas. But before I start, just to also introduce a couple other staff members that are joining me. Christina Gomes, the City Solid Waste and Recycling Program Coordinator. Molly Maciejewski, the Public Works Manager, so my peer down in the operations side of things in the solid waste program area. And then also Jeff Chismerick from Washtenaw County. We're going to touch on the county planning, topic that's already been raised as well. So planning on moving through the program and the topics, which get to that, where there are separate topics, but they do also interrelate. So what I am going to suggest, certainly if there's an immediate question, I'm flexible and can pause, but I think we'll find it beneficial if we can get through the presentation, because there are some things that do either build off of other topics, and then certainly have time at the end to open things up for questions, and then depending on the questions you may have, then we can bring up some of the other staff people as well. And in addition, I know that Kirk Lingo and Brian Weiner from Recycle Ann Arbor, because we'll be talking about the Murph update, certainly if there's questions specific to that operation piece as well. So with that, I will move into the presentation. So first, in terms of how we arrived at the topics for the commission, but also for those in the audience and maybe watching at home. Certainly wanted to give just some general updates on things we know that have been of interest to the commission. And also, I worked through Chair Hutton to find out if there were some specific aspects and topics of the commission, so received those. We certainly strove to include and cover all of those, but if there's something, because some of them were pretty specific, and so if we haven't missed something in particular, some may still have a question, certainly we'll try to cover that at the question and discussions at the end. So the main topics for tonight would be first to provide an update of the Murph, where we're at with that, and some various aspects of that, which you'll see. Certainly already with the commentary, interest in the solid waste plan update, so gives points for that. And actually, we'll jump ahead, will be actually an outline of what staff is looking to include at that high level and seeking that feedback from the commission. Are there either aspects or areas that the commission would seek to be included, or questions on what we've put there, so that we can take that feedback to get that out on the street and get moving forward on that. Then status of some of the major program contracts. I've come in the past and given background to the commission of the whole program. It's actually a very complex program with its operations and players, so some of the major contracts that are expiring or coming up, and the status of that. Then spend some time on work with the county, both the master plan that was already mentioned, and then also related but separate, the regionalization examination that is underway. And then wrap up with a budget update. Always a key question, and something that is certainly something we have to factor into these items. So in terms of the Murph update, first key aspect is the Murph facility itself. And as noted by the speakers, Recycle Ann Arbor began the operations at the Murph on July 1. Started with those operations, and early August, actually August 8th specifically, unfortunately we had a fire at the facility. That fire took place, the fire sprinkler system worked. There was no injury, employee safety taken care of, but of course with that sort of situation you've got to deal with that, and a fire investigation took place. The fire investigation was not able to pinpoint the precise exact cause of the fire, but listed several potential. And so from the safety perspective, the city took the approach of mitigating each of those potential causes, so that we hopefully would not have a repeat occurrence. So as a result of that, though, were several work tasks to mitigate those items, which we've listed here. I won't take the time to read through each of them, but the key point being this was work that clearly wasn't anticipated. Nobody anticipates a fire and plans to have to mitigate for it. So we had work we had to do right off the bat early in this fiscal year with unanticipated work and, of course, unbudgeted needs. So, but to point out a couple of the key ones, being the cleaning and removal of accumulated material. Prior to Recycle Ann Arbor beginning their operations, the Murph had been cleaned out from an operational standpoint, but for the 20-plus years that the Murph was in operation under our original contractor, it had never been totally shut down, if you will. Similar to the auto plants during the holidays, they'll shut down, retool. A facility like this, you get the recyclable materials that do accumulate. It had never been cleaned out. A potential cause of the fire may have been the built-up material that could have literally spontaneously combusted or had something in the material, a lithium battery, a spark from some operation. And so that was an item that had to be mitigated. So that was a very costly item, because we actually brought in an industrial firm to literally do a deep cleanse, if you will, clearing out literally 20 years worth of accumulated material in the nooks and crannies, literally, of the facility. So that was a major undertaking.
I'm sorry.
Interrupted.
When did that take place, the cleaning? The deep cleaning?
I believe the actual date was October? September. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And are there numbers associated with all of the unanticipated expenses?
As of the moment, round figure, it's approximately $200,000. And more to come. So it definitely factors into that. The last section we get to in terms of budget. So the deep cleaning was a key item, and also associated with that, which we'll get to here very momentarily in terms of process, was the bullet below that in terms of the baler feed conveyor and its cleaning and inspection, because the fire was around that piece of equipment, and so that was taken offline. So to move to that aspect, because that's a key item and has affected the operations right now by Recycle Ann Arbor, to first explain that piece of equipment and its function. Recycle Ann Arbor originally proposed a full loose load operation where the recycled material comes in, gets dumped on the tip floor, and loaded into open-top trucks to go to the recycling facility with their partner, Rumpke, down in Cincinnati. Further approach and examination resulted in what's called their hybrid method, where the goal was to take the material from our commercial customers, which is very rich in cardboard or OCC, and separately bale that. So it was a baling operation, similar to what Waste Management was doing with all the recyclables, but this was taking a subset from the certain trucks, baling it and taking it to a local recycler here with that material. So of course, to do that, you need a baler, piece of equipment to bale that material. As part of that process, the material feeds into the top of the baler by 2 conveyors. Just if you can picture a conveyor like in an assembly line or a factory. And one conveyor is where the material is literally pushed off the tip floor and runs down horizontally to then a vertical conveyor that feeds it into the top. So still fairly straightforward, but mechanical pieces. And it was that horizontal baler, horizontal conveyor, which again is one of the older pieces of equipment in the facility, that is now out of commission. And so since that time, Recycle Ann Arbor has gone back to the full loose loading approach because the baler can't operate because the material can't get into it. Mm-hmm. So we've done an analysis of, because there is some cost differences in the 2 operations. With the baled OCC, the commercial material, being baled and sent locally, shorter trips, there is cost benefit to the city for that method when we're able to do it with the baler. But to repair the conveyor in order to get the baler operating will cost money. So the question and the analysis that was performed was, is the financial equation, if you will, beneficial to make the investment and have the cheaper, if you will, or better revenue on the baled commercial, or do we continue with the full loose loading? So from our analysis, it is beneficial to get the conveyor back operating so that we can once again begin baling. But the cost for that is at a level that we have to go through a more full procurement process and have to send it to council for award. So we are in the process of soliciting those quotes and prices so that we can do the full vetting and due diligence that, yep, this is the right price, the best price for that, so that then we can take that to council for that award. So at this point, we're anticipating being able to go to council with that request and award in the January, February timeframe. So by the time that work would get done, we'd be looking at late winter to early spring to be able to get the baler back operating.
So, but if the conveyor hasn't worked since early August and it's now December, why has it taken so long?
Well, getting people out to look at the conveyor, to understand what the costs are, to do the analysis, and as well as the other operational and day-to-day work that staff has. So staffing limitations in the process to actually first even get the conveyor inspected, and that was back on the earlier slide with the unanticipated work. Once the conveyor went down, we had to figure out, can we get somebody in, get approval for hiring them, get them to remove the belt of the conveyor, see if it even could be repaired, does it need to be replaced, get that estimated to a point that we understood if it's something that we have to put out more broadly, go to council. So that all that process takes time.
So do you have quotes to get it
That's
fixed
what we're in
yet?
the process of doing right now.
Okay, so
Yep.
there aren't quotes yet.
Yep, we've got one in, we're looking for at least another couple that we're still trying to receive and get those in.
Okay.
But it's definite, just even from the first, that it's at a level that it requires council approval.
And what level is that?
$25,000.
Okay.
So we're talking over that, added on to the approximately $200,000 that's already been spent.
I'm sorry, I have to ask, my understanding is that we're losing also about $30,000 a month because we're not separating out the high-value cardboard.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to see what the numbers, well, and month to month, it varies because of the tonnage and things, but I would need to go back and check, again, because of variability, but also the spreadsheet that I was using, I was the one doing the main analysis, and I always have to check myself. I have it calculates, and in one row, it calculates it annually versus monthly, so I have to double check whether, and it's probably a number I gave you, Susan, whether that was an annual number or a monthly number, but there is variability in that even too, though, month to month.
Understood, but, you know, if it's been since August, that
But,
would already
yeah.
be approximately $100,000, so it seems like the financial pressure to make this happen more quickly is certainly there.
Yeah, I think that 30 may have been more on the annual, but it's probably in between the
Okay.
30 and the 100.
Well,
Yeah.
I-
Okay.
Could you provide that number to us? Could you provide that number to us? You could just send an email to, if you could provide that to us, I would appreciate that. You
Okay.
could send an email to Commissioner Hutton or the entire commission, that would be great.
Well, you can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Do we want to hold questions, or
I-
do we want to ask questions? I've been writing a bunch down, so.
I have two, we were right on that topic, so
Okay.
it seemed like the
Yeah.
right time.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, another aspect of the Murph update that there was interest, and the timing, as was working with Commissioner Chair Hutton, and the timing for us even to come was the 1st of November was the timing for our material audit that Recycling Ann Arbor and their partner Rumpke performed. So quickly as to what a material audit is, it's a sampling of our material, but you really can't take an entire week's worth, and so this is a sampling. What is called for is a minimum of 40 tons, so basically 2 large semi-trucks, the open truck, open top trailer trucks. We had hoped to have 3, but we had one of the trucks break down, so we did have, though, over 40 tons that was processed. So what happens, Rumpke and the Murph down in Cincinnati, they literally clean out their entire facility, the conveyor, the line, the night before, so that they're absolutely certain that the material that goes through the equipment and the sort line is only the City of Ann Arbor material that's delivered first thing the morning. And Brian and Kirk from RIA, myself, Molly and Christina were all there so that we could see it ourselves and verify, and also just to see their facility and everything with that. So what's on the screen now is the breakdown of the materials that made up that mix from our material that was sorted that day. So see the standard materials and types of things that we get from the single stream mix here in Ann Arbor. And really, again, rather than read down items line by line, but yeah, the OCC again at the top, that's a very prime material and a decent amount there. And the mixed paper, both office paper, that sort of thing, news being sorted out separately there by Rumpke next. And then in the middle, the steel and aluminum, which not too surprising for a state that has the bottle bill, Ohio, where Rumpke is in Cincinnati. See a lot more, especially on the aluminum, the beverage containers, because they do not have the deposit. So they look for that to be higher down there. Then the plastics, the HDPEs, the PETs, and mixed plastics, the scrap metal, and then it's noted the mixed glass and the residuals. So residuals is that material that comes in the stream and is not able to be processed and recycled. So that's the waste and residual material. So that was the results of that audit on November 3rd. And that's, because the conveyor's been down, that was a full loose loading, all the material down there for that sample day. And then by way of comparison of the two methods, again, there's been lots of questions and interest in this. So I put up the audit that was done under waste management when they were doing the baling and transmitting to another Murph. So a major difference in process. But you see a lot of similarities, and the main thing in terms of the mix, it's what our community puts into their carts, into their containers, and is then processed. So again, a good amount of cardboard. Some differences in terms of how it was reported in that waste management was combining the mixed paper and the newsprint. So if you add those numbers together, you see that they were pretty similar in that same range. So again, fairly self-explanatory there. Aluminum, again, very similar with the state with the bottle bill. The glass, again, very similar. They took theirs to Pittsburgh, and Rumpke actually recycles their own themselves at another facility. And the residuals there, slightly higher under the waste management with the baling, but a little bit less with the loose loading.
Kristen, at the moment, where are the high returns in these categories?
In terms of market,
Yeah, income.
good segue, Commissioner Graham, if you wouldn't mind holding for just a slide or two. I'm going to be getting to that, I think, real soon, like the next one. Thank you. So it always helps to have a plant in the crowd. So market conditions, that was something that was of interest. And so number one, recycling is a commodity. The materials that come out and are sorted, those are the whole goal. We're looking to recycle it, reuse it. It's a commodity that's then used in another market for producing other products. So it has hopefully value and hopefully some decent value. The one thing in the recycling solid waste area, I hope I've gotten up to speed fairly quickly. I've been here many, many years. I'm still, in terms of time, new to the game. But the one thing I have learned very quickly is recycling, we've got to do it, we need to do it, but we don't do it for the revenue because we're never going to make more than what it costs for the process. So whereas the commodity piece is beneficial and it's necessary and it greatly helps, it's a key item I've learned is we're not in it to make money. It's not a money producer for us. So key part of that is it is a commodity, so it fluctuates with markets, highly variable. And just to highlight a recent item for folks that's occurring and what has actually is on the slide greatly affected the markets is it has global impacts. And China in particular for the last many years has been a tremendous influence. They've taken, pardon the pun, tons of recyclables from the United States, from Europe. They've been a tremendous importer of recyclable materials and in fact have driven a lot of the markets. Well, for reasons, the Chinese government is starting to change that approach, and they put in place what's known as Operation Green Fence, where they have basically changed their approach and installed much more restrictive limits on the material that comes in and are actually slowing down what literally gets permitted into China with the material. So that has had a tremendous impact on the value and the ability to move those materials, which affects price and market. So the biggest example for now, and this is pulled from the values that are used both in our contract with Recycle Ann Arbor and previous with Waste Management, that we base the revenues that we pay them to process these. For the OCC, the cardboard, which is still very valuable, but since March of this year to the November tables, there's been a 42% drop in that market value. And even more so, the mixed paper market has had a 61% drop in value. So shows the high fluctuation and variability with those markets. So to this point, my first opportunity to put in a little plug for an item that hopefully most of the commissioners have at least heard of, if not fully aware. Through Susan and I, we've been working, and I appreciate patience in us arriving at this point, but and also touching this again in a little bit with a topic on the county work. But we are working and have set up what's called Recycling 101 session with Kelly Rooney, who she is the district manager for advanced disposal. And this is a session she's done for the county. They hosted her in the fall, and I attended it along with Molly and Craig Hupy, our administrator. Found it very informative, beneficial, both in terms of how the markets work, what they're based on, and also just even recycling as a whole process and that sort of thing. So very informative. So we've worked to set that up, and specifically we'll invite the commission as well as city council. It's not going to be a formal meeting. It really is an informal educational session for you folks. It's going to be scheduled here in, I've reserved the council chambers. So the doors are going to be open. I'm sure other people will be here, but the invited guests are going to be you folks and city council. So hopefully, if you don't have it on your calendar already, please try to do that soon. So February 1st, 6 o'clock. And so the Murph, moving forward, the key points and where we're at, Recycle Ann Arbor is under contract with us to continue the operations there at the Murph through June 30th of this year as the first term of the contract. But knowing this is going to take time, the contract has 2 6-month extension clauses in it that are already authorized by City Council. So very likely that will continue for at least another month, if not another full year after that. So next key item out there in terms of the facility is continuing to work and get that conveyor repaired so that we can get the baler back online and go back to that hybrid method. And again, touching to that subject coming up here shortly in the regional discussions, looking at what is the right fix, the right next step for our Murph. What is that right size so that, and this will be a key thing too, back to the Recycling 101 session with Kelly. What is right sizing? What is needed? You need a critical mass so that you have enough material and volume coming in to warrant the investment that will be needed there, because other than the baler, really the baler, we're getting by with the conveyors. All the other equipment in there is going to need to come out. So we're going to be starting literally with a fresh slate there. So we need to know that investment is the right size and know what that's going to be into the future. Okay? That's the Murph. So solid waste plan update. And as I mentioned very quickly at the start, the next couple of slides are really high level outline, if you will, of the major tasks that we have outlined for a scope of work. We have budgeted funds in this year's budget to look to hire a consultant team to assist with this, because we see it as an undertaking that warrants that and don't have the internal staff resource to do that with the other work we have going on. So at its highest level, and to really start and get the team on board, we really feel they need to come in and first set the context, not only of the city, but as we are starting to look more regional and look at the county and communities around us. Our Murph facility certainly got us going that way, but I think there's also been thoughts and efforts with that, the drop-off station and other things that we could do more regionally with that. And so we're going to want that team to come in and really get an understanding of the county plan. So what's that context and how can our plan fit within that? So they're both complementary and working together. Then, as we've called it, the current state of our solid waste programs. So have them come in, get familiar with our financial plan, help get them to understand and even help us see and look forward in terms of our financial structure, our financial plan, and trends. Make sure they understand what our capital improvements are, what we already have on the books. What we also understand is the needs, because again, that will affect where those resources in that financial plan are going to need to go. Understand the existing set of goals from the last plan. So already know that we haven't been able to move forward in a lot of those with other things going on, but let's do an accounting of that. What were we looking to do? where we're at, and what would it take if we were able to move forward? What would it take in terms of time, resources to do that? So understand that, and review what we have been doing, because we have been doing other efforts as well. As mentioned, the organics management plan that's been done and factored in had recommendations and level of needs. There was also a pilot study that was done by Recycle Ann Arbor over the last couple of years to look at the issue of multifamily recycling, and found that's still very difficult, but that's got good findings from that. So factor those in, take the work that's already been done and build upon that and factor that in. Then another key piece, as we do now and have for some time with efforts like this, various projects, is a key separate task around community engagement. And so actually have them build an engagement plan around it. So knowing that we're going to want a robust plan where the community as a whole is engaged. Had some internal talks as we put this program together. I kind of went ahead and kind of already anticipated some things, but was corrected and said, no, we shouldn't tell the consultant how they think it should be put together. Tell them it needs to be full and robust and see what they propose and adjust with that. But anticipating the various customers through these programs, residential versus commercial versus multifamily. They have different needs, different tendencies, but we want to see what that consultant team comes up with, their good ideas of how to engage those groups. And a specific point that as that evolves and gets set up, certainly we're going to be coming back to the commission, either myself or staff at a meeting, or maybe through Matt and Chair Hutton to engage the commission as to where and when of those advisory groups do folks want to sit in on as regular, or at least be aware of. So definitely be an active participant through the engagement process. And then another typical piece with projects such as this that we do here in the city is, in addition to an advisory group made up of members of the community, I would anticipate and looking for the consultant team's input on how would they engage even specific stakeholders. Are there particular either business groups, associations, geographic approaches that we want to maybe not be a full advisory for throughout the whole program, but get them either early or reviewing some recommendations or things. So how would they approach that? And make sure we're really engaging the community as a whole in this plan, and to work to establish the goals for the program moving forward. Then some specific areas that we've been working with as staff and as the city that we are nudging forward, but again, with the things we have going on, still feel we need some outside help, some even outside perspective, or just resources that we don't have available. And mainly related, obviously, the first one with the downtown, which is a very difficult area for us to service with the programs. The alleys in the downtown is a very challenging area in terms of service for our solid waste programs, whether it's recycling solid waste or food waste. And so looking for those folks to come in, do some benchmarking. How do other similar sized cities with our type of service provisions, how do they do it? Are there things we can learn? What could they recommend to us? We'll be filling them in on what we've been looking at and what we've been doing. And then another particular aspect that certainly is citywide, but again is amplified in the downtown because of the tight nature of it and lack of space, is fog as in the industry, or fats, oils, and grease. And again, what do other similar cities do, and what would they recommend? So right now, we are not involved with it as the city of Ann Arbor. It's out there. There's containers out there. We have some high level, but really on the stormwater side of things, regulations in terms of keeping things clean and keeping material like that out of the storm sewer and that sort of thing. But there isn't truly, if you go to our city code, an actual fat, oil, grease code section, if you will. Is that something we should get into, don't get into? Is that the health department? Is it just a stormwater issue? So looking for these folks to come in and help us with that issue, which is one we've been looking to crack the nut on that. Then education and outreach. A key item in all the program areas of the solid waste area. It's a continual item we've got to do. We've got to keep doing it, but it's a good opportunity to, again, get someone outside to look at us and give us some good advice on what are some new ways to do it. What are things maybe we've been repeating, but sometimes it becomes white noise if you say the same thing over and over and people kind of lose the message. But a couple of key aspects here pointed out to have them factor in is, number one, the transient nature of our residents. Certainly, as everyone knows, students, but even renters as a whole. You move around from complex to complex, community to community. Renters are approximately 50% of our residential base. How are you going to teach and educate and reach out to those folks on a continual basis as they keep coming and make sure the message sticks? So how we learn from that. And then even a particular subset, and again, back to my experience with our staff in the alleys, is the transient nature of commercial businesses, commercial customers. We work with folks in the downtown. We get the business manager, their staff, all up to speed on, yep, you got to break down your recyclables. Here's how you put it in the container so it doesn't overflow. And all of a sudden, 2 months later, you got a new manager or you got a new business. And in the solid waste area, we don't know that they've changed. And then all of a sudden, behavior is very different with impacts that then we have to deal with and try to correct behavior. So how do you deal with that? Looking for some help and improvements in that. And then ordinances and regulations. Again, taking the opportunity with the outside resources to take a look at our city code. Again, a very complex code. Been quite a while since we've done kind of a review and revamp. We've done tweaking as things have popped up, but let's take this opportunity and really take a fresh look and say, all right, are there any gaps in there? Any things that kind of overlap that are inconsistent? And also, how does it relate to regulations at the state level, as things may change or may have changed since some of our ordinance words were done, ordinance sections, as well as our own city regulations, because we have city code and then there's solid waste regulations, which are related. But if we're not careful, those can even get out of sync. So making sure that everything is consistent and not creating problems. And then as well, as recommendations come out of this plan, we need the awareness of what local regulations and ordinances need to be changed to be able to implement those recommendations if necessary to make sure that they're successful. So in terms of the process, and after that high-level outline, we'll be certainly get to the end and look for input, thoughts from the commission on other items besides those or adjustments, develop the scope and put out a request for proposal to get consultants, teams in to look to do that work for us. We'll get that out on the street, if you will, get proposals in and select a team, and then that's something clearly that would go to City Council for award. Certainly report back to the Commission as well, keep you certainly fully informed on that, but based on the timeline we're at in that process, at this point we'd be targeted a March timeframe for completing that. And then the actual plan efforts with that, which anticipating about a 12 to 15 month effort for that to get the community engaged, go through those items as we talked about. Okay. So the next item to touch on is, again, some of the major program contracts. We had several last summer that were renewed or actually replaced. I already mentioned Recycle Ann Arbor, our solid waste, municipal solid waste transfer station operator, advanced disposal, began operations in the summer. But more recently, the compost center operations has been operated by WeCare for the last several years, and their contract is set to expire the end of January of 2018. So we went out with a request for proposal. I think I'm going to have to drink my water here in a second. But went out with an RFP, and they were selected again to have that award. And in fact, this past Monday at City Council, that contract was awarded. So WeCare is now on board to continue operating our compost facility. That contract is a 5-year contract initially, and it has an option for 2 additional 5-year terms at the city's choosing. The education and outreach efforts, that's another piece of the program. I already touched on that with the last topic. Currently, we have 2 separate contracts with the Ecology Center. One is for school education programs, going out into the public schools and working with the classrooms, and then another one for the weekend education sessions, which back when the contract was initially entered into, were done in the Education Center at the Murph. Fortunately, with the situation with the Murph, we've had to move that session around. So right now, those are taking place at the Westgate Library on a monthly basis on Saturday mornings. So, but those contracts are, 2 separate contracts are coming due and expiring the end of June. So once we get the master plan RFP out, we've got another RFP to get out to re-up and get that program continued and going. Because we are going to be looking to examine that approach and ideas, as I just mentioned, through the solid waste master plan, rather than a long-term, several-year contract. I put this in here as a 1 year is what I anticipate, so that we can continue that program going. Pretty much, we'll certainly look for tweaks we can think of, but wait for the major overhaul till the master plan is done to really see what are those major recommendations and changes, and then look to implement that after this contract is done. And then on the collections side of things, the residential recycling contract with Recycle Ann Arbor, which is a long-term contract, actually is coming up for expiration on June 30th. So get to that actually in a second, that the other major collection contract is with Waste Management for the commercial collection, so dumpsters throughout town. That has 1 more year, so close, but there's a year offset between these 2 very major collection contracts that are built into the systems. So what we're looking at this point and moving forward is how can we take this really as the opportunity to improve the service delivery across all of these programs. And so the city administrator actually sent out a memo to the council in the fall, and I believe that got forwarded to the commission, right?
Yes.
So the strategy of consolidating collections. So this really speaks to that. And so we'll be working with Recycle Ann Arbor, see if we can, and our legal department, extend that contract for a year so that we can get things to coincide, but really look at what's that strategy to improve our service delivery, simplify things, extend our resources throughout the program. So to the point of why are we looking at this aspect of consolidating our collections? So as you noted, we're looking to hopefully free up resources, dollars, if you will, so that we can continue or even expand services that people are looking for, perhaps such as year-round food waste. Again, looking for that consistent service delivery so that when somebody has had a can missed, we don't have to figure out which of 3 service providers do we have to contact and work with to do that. And simplifying the contract management for that. So again, instead of juggling between 3 different vendors and invoices and tracking. Capital investment that's needed with the fleets as well. And the timing. So why are we looking at this now? As I mentioned, the expiring contracts, but also even from the city side, on the city side of collections, where we're collecting the residential, staffing is actually an issue that we're having, is actually even maintaining staffing, where we lose staffing in this area. It's a difficult and challenging area. We have folks that are retiring, folks that move into other work units, and quite frankly, Molly, that's one of her big challenges, is keeping that operation running with the staffing for that. But that takes time and to make those sorts of transitions, so that's why the examination is and the discussions occurring now, so that we can see if we head that way. And get into perhaps a little detail. I touched on it in the budget because it has budget impacts too, but CNG fueling, that's another item we've been having fun with. Our solid waste fleet, much of it is compressed natural gas vehicles. And in the area right now, there are 2 stations for that, for fast fill of that fuel, so that our trucks, as they're doing their routes, can go and fill up. They're at the Meyer stores on Carpenter and Ann Arbor Saline Road. And if you weren't aware, unfortunately, those have been down and have been down for, I think, we're going on 3 months, if not 4 months. So as of now, each of those trucks has had to go over to the east side of Ypsilanti, and actually for a brief period, Milford, to get fast fuel, and to the point that it was tremendously affecting our service, so we have had to go and actually rent diesel trucks just to be able to provide service. So service delivery and cost impacts, expense impacts from the CNG that's affecting us. So again, if we can kind of have somebody who's got that full fleet, that full infrastructure to do that, looking at that being an improvement. And then again, the regionalization examination going on this winter. Don't know yet, this regionalization, it's talk and discussion, a lot of interest, and I think my segue into that. But is it recycling? That's certainly a key point that started it, but is there interest in, even on the collection side or other aspects, transfer station, looking at that more global approach? Is there cost sharing and just more of that bulk buying, if you will, that can help communities, ours included, to get things stretched even farther so that we can do other programs and things that we're looking to do. So with that as my segue into county planning and the regionalization examination. First item is, as I believe the Commission's aware, Jeff Zmerek and folks in his group came to the Commission in July. Actually, funny, Jeff thought it was only October, September, but time flies when you're having fun. So it came to the Commission in July with a draft amended plan, and where that plan has moved forward and continued to literally just last night, the county presented the amended solid waste management plan, Washtenaw County Solid Waste Management Plan, to their Board of Commissioners, and they approved it. And in terms of their process at the county level, what their staff will now be doing is going out to all of the jurisdictions, the communities in the county, all 28, and asking for their bodies, their approval bodies, to approve the plan. If 2/3 of those municipalities approve it, the plan will then move on to the state, to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality for their review and hopefully their approval, and then that would be the adopted county solid waste management plan. And again, Jeff's here, that if there's questions at the end, I'm sure he'll help us out with that. But as a sub-point with that, realize that the county would like to have the city of Ann Arbor actually be one, if not the first body to act on it, as the commission has seen it. And if desired, added on the agenda an actual resolution for your consideration tonight to recommend to the city council of approving that, but that will be a next agenda item here coming up, and we can get to that more specifically then. So that's the county plan amendment. To the examination of regional approaches for solid waste and recycling from a larger view than the city of Ann Arbor, and looking at the county as more of a regional approach. There's been things going on. Outline those steps and those items that have occurred since last summer. Began in August with a gathering. The county held a session where all the jurisdictions in the county, all 28, were invited to attend an open discussion. It was facilitated, actually, if you scanned to the bottom of the slide, Bob Gettert is a consultant from Resource Recycling Systems. He actually was in Austin, Texas, if anyone knows anyone that worked in Austin, Texas. He was there for a number of years, worked with Howard Lazarus, our city administrator down there. But Bob is now a consultant with Resource Recycling Systems. So Bob came in for that one session to facilitate a discussion. And really the goal was, is there interest among the broad communities? Is there interest in the townships, the smaller cities and villages for looking at a larger solution and approach to solid waste recycling and perhaps even compost? So the outcome of that session was that, yes, there was interest by those attended. All 28 did not come. We didn't the county tried to entice them, did a pretty good job with lunch, always helps. But really everyone that was there was interested in continuing the discussion and actually learning more. That was one big thing that they were looking for was, well, we don't know that much about it to a lot of folks, especially those that don't have staff involved directly at all. It's a black box, literally. They hire someone or don't even have a program, leave it to their residents. So learning was a big part of what was discussed. And so to that end, the county sponsored, circling back, the Recycling 101 session that I attended. So that was held. That's where I first met Kelly and was very impressed as a very informative session and got the idea that this is something we'd like to bring here to you folks. So that occurred in September. And then in November, there was interest in actually seeing a real live Murph. Because again, a lot of folks just don't know. You hear Murph, don't know what it is. And by November 15th, the deep cleansing had been done at our Murph that folks could go in. Staff, we walked folks through, explained what at least our process was. The old equipment's still there. Showed how our process, our loose loading is occurring today. But then the group also went over to the Chelsea area, to the Western Washtenaw Recycling Authority and their Murph over there. So that way people could have a comparison in terms of approach, very similar in approach, but certainly scale, different methodology, but a good learning exercise. And so where things are continuing and headed is Bob Gettert is going to continue and facilitate now further, more detailed discussions as things are, people are getting a bit more up to speed. Bob bringing in some material, actually engaging the communities, and we're working now to schedule that after the very first of the year. The county, this is the county lead. We're city staff working to support them, but really it's a county effort. And to engage those communities and various stakeholders, including service providers and things as to looking at this. And another outcome is that Bob will be preparing and submitting a study of what are potential structures, an authority, a board, contract services, and what do those options look like, and what could the financing mechanisms be, so that all those folks could have a better understanding of, well, what is it we're looking to sign up for. So that's go with that. And the time frame for that actually is to be done this winter. So this is seen to be a quick process, so that by the spring we'll have a sense as to what the options are, and even hopefully a direction of who's strongly interested in looking to move it forward. So my last item, always a key topic in the area of the solid waste budget resources. So first, questions in terms of budget status. You've heard me come, unfortunately, talking about the solid waste fund balance. It's long seen and long was a healthy fund balance, but for some time, and there's a note on the slide all the way back to 2011, we've known and seen it's been eaten away pretty much almost every year. The graph here shows a slight increase there for a couple of things, but definitely the trend is a decline, and that is continuing. The green bar across there, and as noted, pardon the small print, tried to fit it in the box, but in plain English, that's the policy level, internal funding policy level of the fund balance level. And that's based on maintaining 15% of our operating costs in reserve. So we have that available. So I purposely did that a little wider because there is some variability by year, but that's where that bar is at. And so as you see, we're going to be approaching that. And again, other key items with this that still aren't factored in, those Murph items that I mentioned are not yet factored in there because those haven't been budgeted. This is a snapshot in time, and so we're going to be eating into that even further. So funding is the key driver in this area. And to update to this information will definitely be updated to remind folks, mostly at home, but the city has a 2-year budget cycle. This is the beginning of our budget season, moving into what will be an update year. So we are about to move into our second year of the 2-year budget. So our guidance from the financial folks is your budget's basically set. We did it last year as the second year of a 2-year budget. There's certainly things that may be tweaked, but and we'll be looking at updated numbers and getting that updated information. And so that will be presented to council through that process in the February-March timeframe. And so we will certainly share that with the commission as well. Keep you posted as to that information as well as when that's going to council if you're interested for that in particular. And then some other, I think these might be the last couple of items that we heard were of interest to the commission was staffing. And again, that actually to the public comment too, so timely to provide some update on that. So this graph and the first part in staffing really focuses around the program or planning level, not the full staffing through the entire solid waste fund. So basically operations staff isn't in here, but I gleaned from the question that it was more in terms of folks at systems planning and that sort of thing in terms of looking at the programs and things and questions about staffing. Where has it been? Where is it today? And where is it going? So this graph is meant to represent that. Going back to 2010 was the question as to the amount of staffing that we had in the solid waste area. So in terms of budgeting, and in case folks aren't familiar, the term FTE, full-time equivalent. You may have somebody like myself who, regular employee, I've got 40 hours a week, I'm budgeted, but my budget is sliced and diced, if you will, across multiple funds with the various things that I do. So if you look at my FTE, I'm made up of solid waste and water and sewer and roads and all sorts of things. So what this graph is representing is the makeup of those staff that were funded from the solid waste fund, if you're looking backwards or if you're looking forward, that are budgeted from that, and what portion of their funding was from that fund. So that's where in the first couple of years, you see we had 2.5 FTEs that were funded, so 2 people were funded full-time. That was solid waste, recycling, the full program area was their full focus. And then the one at the bottom, the communications liaison, that was Nancy Stone at the time, but she was actually split between solid waste and the water area, so stormwater and water funds. So then moving forward, we had someone leave us, left, supposedly retired, but is now back in the, I think, working for us. I don't know, Kirk, does Brian work or?
Yeah, it depends on the day.
Okay.
An hour.
Okay. So we, that position wasn't funded there for a while, and so that's where you see that drop. Then as noted, actually by one of the speakers, fiscal year 17, replacing and adding an FTE was approved in the budget. That we began that process, started interviews, but that was stopped. And really the thought and the opportunity, if you will, with us looking at really where are we going with the Murph, with regionalization, with that broader area, this gives us the opportunity to shape that position as that becomes clearer to really make sure that the skills and the experience that are needed for what that area goes can be put to that position. So that's where that position is there, as well as just the bottom line fact that the fact that we're not having to pay somebody and their benefits, some limited amount of benefit to the fund that's not being hit by a new position that's not being filled. I know it means less resource, but that's part of the reality that we've got to deal with. But then there's another position that's actually just been added, and though we are looking to move forward, titled here Educational Compliance Liaison, that looking to get a person I really can work very closely with Christina, where she's working with all the contract management and the things she's got to do to keep those services and those programs going. But we need somebody who can get more kind of out on, boots on the street, if you will, both doing direct engagement and education, back to my point of the businesses, the new manager at the deli that doesn't know anything about recycling because they came in last week, or they're behaving badly, or compliance issues. So getting that person that can be the eyes and ears and the touch point more directly to the customers than we're able to with the current staffing. So that's what that position is going to be written around, and so that's being developed so that we can get that person on board. And then another, I think this is my final item, was goals. Question was asked about goals and SMART goals in particular, and I should have that one ingrained by now, but I'm afraid I don't, but I know it's, I know you know it, John. Yes, specific, measurable, attainable,
realistic, time-bound.
thing. So to that, the just direct answer, don't think we've truly got true SMART goals, if you will, but to speak to goals and how those do build into what we do, both definitely here in solid waste, but broadly with the city as well. And in fact, it comes back to you folks in sustainability and the sustainability framework, the work that Matt did, Jamie Kidwell years ago, and Wendy Ramson, is the solid waste budget and the things that we're target program are fit in within the sustainability framework. The sustainability framework is the framework for goals within the city. Our budgeting process, our capital improvements planning, it's going to be built into, I may have skimmed over it in the slide, or I may have forgotten it in the slide about our solid waste master plan update. That's going to be a key piece of our RFP so that those folks know these are our community goals and directions from a sustainability standpoint, and you've got to build us around that because we've already established those. So those are well established through the program. And we'll certainly be looking at more unique and more detailed goals with the upcoming solid waste plan, but again, working within that context of the sustainability framework. But then at the last, just to clearly say and what drives us on that daily basis and where we put our resources most directly when we have to is providing the services to that community, to the community with those resources that we have. So with the funding, the calls that we have, the services with our service providers and staff, that's our number one top priority is keeping that operation going and continue. So with that, I appreciate you putting up with me droning on. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. Take a break and wet my whistle and see if there are questions, discussion. And again, folks are here to help things either I can't or that are better suited to respond. So with that.
All right. Are there questions?
I have questions.
Yeah, I have questions too.
I take it I should stay up here for a bit. Okay.
Go ahead, somebody.
Okay, I'll start. I'm wondering how the organics management plan that was finalized earlier this year plays in with the solid waste management plan, because it worries me that we spend all this time and effort making an organics management plan and nothing is planned to come out of it, and now we're about to go through another planning process when we have all of these other things in line that would impact what goes into a solid waste plan. So I guess I'm just wondering how the two play together and how we're actually going to implement a lot of the things that are going to go into the plan when we have 1 million contracts coming up this year and clearly not enough staff people to even cover that level of work. That's a really big question, and maybe someone can add to it, or I don't know.
I can respond, but if there's others to add,
And I think that was also expressed in the comments. I mean, where is the organics plan?
So maybe to start try to respond to Commissioner Skinner's question, and I think I'll get to that too, is at the end of the day, it comes down to resources, whether the resources are staffing level and the things we've got to do on a day-to-day basis, part of that being things like implementation of a new program, which means structuring it, setting it up, also the day-to-day operations and the things that need to be done to keep things moving, whether it's dealing with customers, dealing with staff and fleet equipment issues, or contractors and invoicing and just services there. As well as to do those things, to pay the staff, to have the trucks and the carts, to pay the contractors, and to have those services, that takes financial resources. And as the closing subject with the budget, that's really been and continues to be the major, huge issue, that to add new programs, and borne out in the plan, the organics management plan, is it's at a cost, and really to implement things is going to either take money, and was recommended. I'll look to Christina to pinch it for me when I don't have the right details, but do we pilot in a particular neighborhood on the residential side, but clearly on the commercial side, to really have it successful is going to need to be a fee basis, a subscription service that we can't fund, we can't subsidize that. So yes, there's a lot of desire, goals, benefits, it's the right thing to do, but the city can't pay for it and carry everyone with it. So, really the larger piece of answering the question, why aren't we, how do we get there? Really see this upcoming master plan as laying that structure of, take those things we've already looked at, and in the case of the organics management plan, that was a tremendous effort. I thought CB&I did a great job, engaged the community, got the feedback, has an understanding of what it'll take. So take that information, not going to redo it, but how do we fit that in? But we also have a Murph and a recycling program that needs, and we've heard it, staff has heard it, staff understands and wants to advance us, move us forward, got to be a leader, got to get the Murph back up and running. We've got a lot of things we want to do, we need to do, but our bag is only so big, and so I really see the solid waste master plan effort, getting someone on board, working with the community on that bigger picture, and taking in those things that we've already worked on and quantified, and lay out and work with us to say what can fit in the bag and what doesn't fit in the bag, and if we want to, what is it going to take to get it in the bag? What are we going to have to either charge or change our funding mechanism or find larger partners? And what can't fit in the bag and we can't find a way to do it, but put off to the side until a time that we can have the means and the resources to do it. So lay that structure out fully so that we can have a better understanding and that better overall roadmap, but understanding what is it going to take to do them, what are the implementation costs, the resource needs, so that we have something that we, as I said, we understand what can fit in the bag we have, knowing we've got all of these over here that we want to put in. So I'm not sure if that's as eloquent. I was trying to describe it as best I can, so hopefully I was at least close.
I do have one more question. Well, I have many more questions, but one right now. Are the regionalization discussions limited to the Murph, or would they include like hauling contracts for the, okay.
Yes, and I'm going to look for Jeff to double check me too, but from the discussions and really the direction, we're looking at it broadly. I mean, we're reaching out, and in fact, give plug Eva, or Jeff a plug and get him up here probably soon, but a goal from the county plan is to cooperate with amongst jurisdictions, look for those benefits across all of the program areas, recycling, solid waste.
Yeah, we're going to look at the needs of all the communities by engaging the stakeholders to figure out what kind of services through regionalization we can provide. Solid waste services, recycling, composting, and the like. It depends on the stakeholders' needs and the critical mass of the communities that we get together, including institutions too. So we're taking a broad approach to this, and we're going to winnow it down to see what we can get so we can get the ball rolling in terms of regionalization. That also includes funding options. There's many funding options through state legislation that we could use to help fund these types of programs also. So we could broaden it, get the economy of scale, and get one message out to the whole area versus all these different communities with different haulers and trying to educate citizens and businesses on what they can and can't do. With one system, it's an easier way to educate folks. So we see many benefits from this regionalization, funding, education, economy of scale, and we're going to take the next step coming in January 17th and 18th with these interviews and stakeholder meetings. So we'll have more to report on later. So.
I have a question on that. How much interest is there from these other communities? Or is it just we're spending all our resources hoping they join us, and in the process, we don't have the staff or the resources to do the things that I think Ann Arbor would like to do, like, doing the composting?
Other communities in the area are in the same boat.
Okay.
Ypsilanti, Scioto Township, Pittsfield Township, they all have a need to look at ways to cut their costs in terms of solid waste and recycling. And some of the costs have gone up for disposal for some of the communities, and some of them have 5 different trucks going down the road. They're subscription services. So they see the need by getting more trucks off the road, having more better services for their customers at a better price, and by looking at a regional approach, we could hopefully get there, and hopefully also included funding through the regionalization too. So,
Thank you.
I really applaud the regional thinking and the global view that you guys are taking. I was afraid when that was first raised as a course of action going forward that it would take a long time. Is it really true that you can work through these discussions this winter and come to some conclusions relatively rapidly?
recommendations are going to be provided by March. And then we're going to approach the communities to find out where if we have critical mass to move forward with recommendations.
Very good. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
But actually building a Murph is going to take time.
That's another matter, a
Yeah.
different question.
We have questions about that, too.
Could you describe the difference between what just got approved that you all put forward and what you're hoping is the difference in what this other effort that you have? Because you talked about something already being approved that you just, so.
Our solid waste plan was approved by the Board of Commissioners. So to implement to get to the goals and objectives that are in our solid waste plan, one of the approaches and one of the objectives is regionalization, or looking at working together. So it works hand in hand, the regionalization. Yeah, please pass out. Christina's going to be giving out the executive summary for the solid waste plan. In there, it kind of points out the goals and objectives. But to meet that, we have to have a better approach. And one of the issues that we have is data management. When we have 5 different haulers and different municipalities, we're not getting really good information from them in terms of what they're collecting from residents. And there's a broad range of price that people are paying for these types of services. So by working together, hopefully we can streamline that. We do have, like I said, interest from communities that have subscription-based hauling. Scioto Township is interested in working with us, and also Ypsilanti and Pittsfield Township. So hopefully if we can get a core community built, we could get something on the road sooner than later.
And what does critical mass mean to you in terms of,
Well,
is that
it
a
depends
certain
on your
percentage of
the goals and objectives, like for instance, the amount of households that you have, the current generation rates of what they're producing, like Crescent was showing you, there's certain commodities that are found in the waste stream. So if you're going to be targeting residential, for example, and you have X amount of households, this is the kind of numbers that you need to determine what kind of MRF you want to have, because a commercial MRF that was operated by Great Lakes Recycling up by the landfill in Salem Township was a commercial MRF. So you have to have that critical mass to figure out what kind of MRF you want to build to get the best efficiency out of that MRF. So we need that critical mass, those numbers, those people on board to raise their hand and say, yes, we're really interested and we want to take the next step, and then we can go ahead and go there from determining what kind of MRF you want to build.
And then one more question. I think we have this chicken and egg issue with the city in terms of a staff person and taking it on, and that they don't, you know, we don't know what we really want to be, but at the same time, we're not getting things done because we don't have somebody there. What kind of capacity is at the county for that regional approach in terms of staff people that you already have? Like, what, do you all have more ability to be able to move this thing forward than we do right now?
Currently we have staff, and we also are going to be hiring a manager in the Public Works because that'll be the specific task for that Public Works manager is to be working, leading the regionalization, and we have 4 staff members that will support that person along working cooperatively with the city and other folks.
Okay.
I have one quick question. Are EMU and University of Michigan
Yes, they're
institutions that you mentioned institutions? Are those 2 key institutions? That
Yep, Concordia College, Washington Community
good.
College,
Okay,
all the schools are involved. That's a different group of stakeholders that will be meeting together to determine what kind of needs they have.
Great.
So the city solid waste planning effort will be intimately connected with the county's efforts as it proceeds? That'll be one sort of guideline for that contract?
Yeah, that sure is.
You don't want to speak for me. Yes, that's our intent and goal. And really, building off these discussions that we've been having and actually getting a little ahead, it's in the resolution itself, but even back to the county plan itself, Christina was on the committee. She was the rep for cities within the county. So the city was already participating in the last couple of years on developing that countywide plan. So this is something that we've got to look regionally more broadly, and so it really needs to be complementary and fit within the context of that.
I just, can't help but notice that there seems to be a really clear relationship between the precipitous plunge of the solid waste fund balance and the staffing levels. And I understand that you guys don't have extra time to take this on. I think that's completely legitimate, but I don't understand why we are not hiring people. Maybe oversight of the Murph would have been handled differently.
Well,
it looks to me, I understand that it's hard to allocate FTEs, but, if I'm reading this right, it looks like about a $10 million drop in about 3 years, and that seems like that would be worth a few FTEs.
I'll start off by answering why we didn't fill the position. We had the position described and advertised, and we were then directed not to fill it until we knew what direction the programs were going in. The decline in the solid waste balance and staffing levels, I don't think that is a correct correlation to draw. That decline in balances was the result of some of the GASB changes in the government accounting standards and how we have to account for pension costs and other post-employment benefit costs, and also the markets collapsing. The real decline in the markets for recycled materials. I think it's a combination of all those together.
Well, yeah, and I understand that too. And I think it makes sense to not hire someone if you don't know where you're going. But at the same time, I think that the staffing is the issue, that you haven't been able to put together the RFP. I mean, the memo that we got in May from the city administrator said the RFP was going to be assembled in the summer, and it's December.
When you say the RFP, which one? Oh,
Uh,
for the master plan?
Yes.
Yes, that is clearly a staffing level. And with the, all the unplanned activities at the Murph, the occurrences of things occurring there, that does divert us from taking on that task.
And that makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is why people don't decide that you need more help. I know you don't have anything to say tonight.
I hear your question.
So, given lowering market income and continuing problems with the Murph, one should expect the council's budget and your budget request going into next year is going to show very different levels of support for solid waste than we've had to do in the last decade, correct? In other words, something's going to have to give once that balance goes down
Yes,
below the green
yes.
line.
And that's one of the reasons why we are looking at consolidating collections, trying to limit our capital investments in rolling stock, et cetera.
To that question, one piece of the collections is done by city employees. I presume it's true that any city employee, if the collections contract moves away from them, will be well employed elsewhere in the city?
That is one of the drivers for us right now. We are seeing a wave of retirements in our public works staff. And that is an opportunity to move folks around so that we can adjust without anybody losing any employment.
Good. So my last question, the Murph as it sits out there at the moment, you've got it cleaned up. You're going to take a contract to replace the conveyor belt to the council next month. The baler will be up and operating if all goes well shortly thereafter, a few weeks maybe. That's your planned schedule? That's
For
way-
for the short term,
Right.
why we're looking at the regionalization plan as to what is the group or folks that will come together in some sort of regional effort. And
get that.
you've heard tonight, it's not just recycling, it's all of solid waste regionalization.
I applaud this. Go fast. Fast as you can go.
The consolidation plan makes sense to me, but I still don't understand the relationship between the regionalization efforts and the long-term contracts the city's pursuing. Can you explain that?
The consolidation contracts are all on the collection side. So that, while it is now just focusing on city collections, as we've had discussions with the larger group, we have heard them express interest, other members saying that if you're going to go out in 18 months being in a consolidated contract, us too, maybe we want to be part of it. That is not part of the regionalization discussion on the Murph, but it is what we've uncovered as we've had the regionalization discussions on the Murph, that other folks may be very interested in our model of looking at consolidating all the collection contracts. Now, whether anybody actually joins us on the collection side, we'll see how that transpires, but we believe we have enough mass on the collection side, enough bulk of business to attract some very good rates.
It sounded like when I asked earlier, though, that it wasn't just the Murph that was the subject of the regionalization. It was all of collections as well.
Yeah, there's drop-off centers. We've looked at the drop-off centers with the county. I will not speak to landfilling on that side of it, because we do have a contract already for that. I know other communities are probably very envious of the landfill rate we got. We haven't talked to them yet about whether we would consolidate trucking and transfer, but for solid waste, but that's clearly something we'd consider.
So you would wait to make a decision on the consolidation of contracts for these surrounding communities who have clearly shown interest?
No, we are exploring and going forward with our collection
Separately.
contracts. If we have other people expressing interest, we wouldn't exclude them. But we are going forward unless council tells us otherwise to consolidate the collection side of the business.
Wouldn't that sort of major shift that I can see that there's clear benefits to that, but wouldn't something that major be included in a solid waste plan? In that sort of planning process?
It can be, but it doesn't change. The collection business has to take place. The solid waste plan is looking at what programs you put in and what happens. I'm looking at Jeff a little bit. I don't want to say on the downstream side, but we are not planning to eliminate any programs. So all the programs we have for collection now have to go forward. If you're doing an organics collection later, that can be added on, negotiated with a consolidated contract in place.
So I have a question. In your brochure that you just handed.
That's not mine, that's
on that
his.
one. It talks about working towards zero waste.
Yes.
How did we accomplish that without an organics plan? And I
That's
haven't
right.
received, I get the sense that it's kind of the stepchild that nobody's going to look at. Because maybe there's no funding and maybe there's no, what do we need to do to get it working?
Right. If you put curb carts for single stream at every household, you're not going to get there to meet our goals. So we need to do something with organics. I can speak on behalf of the county what we're doing with
Sure.
organics. We do zero waste events. The Taste of Ann Arbor, for example, we had 16 out of the 40 booths participate by using compostable containers. Next year, all 40 vendors. It's an example of what we can do. We run a master composter program where we educate master composters. We had 25 folks register through Rec and Ed, then finished up this fall. We try to reach out and provide as many services. We did 25 zero waste events, including in Saline, in Chelsea, and Ypsilanti. So we try to get out there, and not only do we use these as a collection but it's also an educational opportunity for those folks who are understanding what they're putting in what container at the point of service. So that's what we can do. That's what we're doing right now. But we would like to see it. For us to meet our goals, we really have to look at organics. And that's one of the things through regionalization perhaps that we can tackle. Providing better services for all county residents in terms of their organics management. Not every community has the same needs, of course. Folks that live out in the rural areas don't have the same need as those who live in the city. And we're looking mainly at residential for the organics. I know the city has undertaken a commercial. That's the next step. That's a little big for us right now, but we're just trying to expand the organics collection for the residential side.
So when are we looking at having winter time organic pickup? And when are we looking to expand it to schools that want to participate?
That's the city.
Well, I guess I'll
I-
jump in.
I'm sorry, and I have been at some of the zero waste events, and I love it, and it does a great job of that. I just think that to really get critical mass participation, we need year-round composting. and collection in places such as, Mr. Ezekiel brought by elementary. His wife is part of this valiant effort to try and have it year-round, and it is physically, he can talk about having to put it into the curbside when pickup restarts. I do it at home. But it's not really going to be critical mass until we have those services available. So when would we look at that?
Again, back to, I think the answer I tried to provide to Commissioner Skinner's question of fitting things in is the answer of the when is, I feel, going to be part of that solid waste plan effort so that we can see where those different moving parts are, if you will, now that we know what it would take in terms of resources, in terms of costs to implement that program so that we can figure that out. Just to the point of a key point of the difficulty with implementing year-round food waste and composting versus the seasonal that we do. And again, it comes down to budget. And I hate to keep repeating the theme, but it's what drives this, that by having a seasonal compost program, we have employees that are temporary employees. We hire them for the season. We have equipment that we're able to rent and lease. And so we don't have those added ongoing costs for the fleet, for the staff, with benefits, the retirement, and those sorts of things. So what sounds very simple is it's only 2 more months or 3 more months, but it's not 2/12 of an increase in costs. It's basically a doubling off the top of my head, but it's not a linear difference. It's a major leap that with the situation that in order to do that, something has to go away with our current situation.
So is it a matter of then, for groups who are interested in it, is it a matter of harassing city council and advocating for increased costs? Because I will say this, before I got involved with the Environmental Commission and as a citizen of Ann Arbor, we talk a lot about affordable housing, but the way you get families to afford things is to give good jobs that have benefits. And so to me, this sort of, we just have part-time employees, that's interesting, but it doesn't really jive with our values in terms of affordable housing or having, people who can make a living and live in our communities. And also, if we really are talking about zero waste and if we're really signing on to the Paris Agreement, then we kind of have to put our money where our mouth is. And so is it a matter of starting to lobby city council about making sure that this becomes a priority? Because it does not strike me like it is a priority in any way.
We hear what you're saying. It is a strongly desirable program to have. With the current model we have for collection, it's not economically makes sense to put forward. However, one of the advantages of going to a consolidated collection contract, it then becomes, we believe it will become a more viable option to pursue.
It's interesting that you say desirable versus economically feasible. Doing green things in the current state of things is not economically feasible a lot of times. But I think it is desirable, and I think that it is worth investing in.
I'm going to bump my boss out of the way. Just as far as council, and ultimately, yes, council is the decision maker, and it is part of the choosing, if you will, of if things to do more, either something has to go away or we have to have the added funds to cover those costs. I mentioned it very quickly, and it was a quick blip in the budget slide, but refer back to a note that in 2011 was when staff and we really noticed the decline in the revenues. There was actually a work session at City Council that July that raised that issue and posed things to try to approach that. Things like, do we franchise out and contract the services? Do we go to every other week collection to save money and stretch those dollars? Do we go with what's known as pay as you throw, where you have to buy your solid waste bags from the city front desk for a fee that then covers those costs and goes into that fund to generate that revenue? And there's downsides with that, because then people don't want to pay, and all of a sudden their trash ends up in their recycle bin, which they don't get charged for. But there were options put out and explored, but the direction of the council at the time was, we don't want to head in that direction. And it's a continual, we've look at options, we're trying to hold to fit in what we can. That's where, again, the plan update that we're about to undertake to try to figure out. These are, yep, the goals, the directions, the desires of the community. How can we best make that fit in, and working with the community as a whole to help us weigh those in terms of priorities, and even ask those questions. Would you be willing to pay to have your trash picked up an added fee, or for year-round composting? Here's what we heard from the study before, quantify that, but recheck in, and again, fitting it within the full big program picture across all of the programs of all the services.
Go ahead.
Mine is a different topic, so if you're on this one, then you should ask. No.
I've got, as I said, a lot of questions.
Okay.
I'm sort of on this topic. Can we just go back to the timeline for the solid waste plan again? So I understand that you are hoping to have council award the contract in March of 2018. And how long?
I noted target, yep.
No, understood.
Yep.
But how long do you anticipate the plan taking beyond that? Is that where the 12 to 15-month window begins?
Yes, so that would be the start point for that 12 to 15 months. And even with that, as a practical matter, if council awards it, there's still the kind of paperwork that shuffles back and forth that to truly get it started will probably take a few weeks after that to get them on board and all the paperwork. But yeah, once they get started and moving forward, we anticipate it to be that 12 to 15 month period.
Is it possible to accelerate that?
Yeah, and that's something, we can lay out to the consultants, and we would certainly, our typical is, here's our anticipated, and what factors into review of proposals and things is the work plan. So how are you going to do it? What's your approach? But how fast is it going to take? How long is it going to take? What's it's going to cost? So we could certainly even structure it for kind of, here's the base proposal, if you will, but what would it be to, ramp it up? But also at the same time, we also need to be careful that we don't move too quickly to where we're either not catching everyone in terms of our engagement and our stakeholders or something else. So yeah, there's certainly a balance, but again, we can certainly put it out in a variety of ways and look for their expertise as to how they would approach it and to find what's going to get us to the best point as quickly but as effectively as possible.
And then is the intention to hold off with that hiring until after the plan is made?
I haven't been told of a specific time frame or tie to that hiring, but I'm sure that will be something to continue to look at, whether it's tied more closely to our plan or the regional discussions, but I'm sure it's all going to be in that mix as to once we see where we're headed in a direction to be able to really shape the position and the role the best way to be most effective, whether that's as part of the Ann Arbor plan itself or the regional discussions. I'm certainly looking to move it forward as quickly as we can.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Kind of following that, given the consultants that you want to hire, how would they dovetail with the regional discussions going on with the county so that even though I totally believe in this, I also don't want the city to fund the entire county's study, that, everybody should be pitching into that effort, not just us looking forward to what everybody else should be doing. So I also want to be efficient and fair to what we're paying for in terms of our own plan and making sure that the boundaries are real clear, which is tough because we're trying to make all those decisions too about where the county's more regional effort will be going.
Right. Well, in terms of timing, as Jeff mentioned, the regional discussions are already really underway. I mean, it's amongst jurisdictions and staff people and clerks in the townships and the various things. So that's got some advantage in that it's a little less formal. It's not really that master plan. It's getting discussions, but with this piece with Bob Gettert helping us with expertise to give us information and to lay out options. And as Jeff mentioned, we're really looking to have that, in essence, kind of wrapped up to see where we can go by the March timeframe, which actually, it doesn't dovetail great that we can't put out an RFP that says, here's what our regional direction is. But we're certainly going to build in there, here's what's happening at the county level. We're going to describe that. As with all of our proposals, we're going to have a time set for people to come in and ask questions, and we are certainly going to lay that out and explain so that people have that full understanding and see this is something we're really looking at, very interested in with our neighbors, and that they need to factor that in and be prepared, even if they don't know what the end answer is, know that there's going to be something, and to factor that into their approach and plan and work with us.
Okay.
So that it does, so in essence, that does dovetail into our efforts.
Commissioner Needham?
So I don't want to put you or anyone else here directly on the spot, so I'm not going to phrase this as a question, but just instead as a comment. Jumping off of what Commissioner Hutton has been saying and asking, I understand that there is some value in waiting to make this hire and seeing how the position needs to be shaped going forward. I understand there's some value in that approach, but it just seems to me there is far more value in having that person on board while we're going through all these things, the city solid waste plan and the regionalization discussions and trying to get the Murph back into some semblance of functioning. I mean, to have a fully staffed solid waste unit now seems to me just immeasurably more valuable than the value of waiting to see what the position might become.
I'd like to second that comment.
Third.
Yeah, I think
we're all on board there.
Yeah.
I did have a question on just this, and in the scheme of things, this is a very minor point, but you mentioned the issues with the CNG fueling, and I happen to live on Summit Street, and a few years back, there was that city natural gas fueling station on the 721 North Main Yard. It was on Summit Street, but in the corner of the North Main property. What happened to that? Would there be any chance to revive that for?
Well, I'm going to shift that one over here really quickly, but key point of clarification, it was a DTE facility on city land.
Okay.
So, but, yep, I
So
totally
DTE
understand.
shut
So
it down.
in terms of the backstory, I'm going to turn to Mr. Nod to help with that one.
That had been there for a while. It was an old facility, not crazy fast. It took a while to recharge, but still it was a facility that, especially at the time, I think it was mostly the CNG Hondas. There were some light-duty vehicles that tend to use it a lot. I'm not sure if we used it for city
we did.
vehicles much. Craig's nodding no. During the whole North Main Task Force effort and what to do in early Allen Creek Greenway, residents started raising safety concerns, and it just kind of started to perk up as do we still need this? And we didn't prompt it so much as DT was part of that discussion and they heard this, they just decided to remove it. So, I think it was also one of those things getting at the end of its useful life and was going to require some investment, and given the city was uncertain about the long-term use of that property, they just made a corporate decision that, yeah, it was time to take this out. So
And I
4 or
forgot
5 years ago?
I think
This
it's
is where
5 or 6.
I've been here too long, where
Yeah.
I'm kind of, it
You
seems
lose
like
track.
only a few years ago, but probably more.
Yeah. But I think a key point, as you said, Matt, I don't recall it being a fast fill. So from a fleet perspective, I don't think it was a
I don't know that it would
solution
have helped us. I mean, it would have been some gas,
Yeah.
but again, these things tend to take a long time to recharge because it's low pressure in the pipe, so they have to compress to build up enough to fill up one of these big trucks.
I'm mindful of the time. I know we've kept you here for a long time. I will also say that I would like to have more information at some point about what the interim plan is between when this regionalization happens and what we're going to do now, in that interim period. I think that we're all very interested in hearing about that as well.
I think a key point to that is just regular updates.
Yep.
Certainly myself, staff coming back for something in-depth like this, but even from time to time, you know, passing through updates through Matt and some sort of reports. I'm hesitating myself of not burdening myself with too much to where all we're doing is reporting,
Right.
and that's taking up time away
Right.
from doing things, but certainly finding that meeting where you folks are being informed and kept abreast of where things are at and where they're advancing, so
Well,
certainly.
and I'm mindful of that too. I mean, I know that it takes a lot of time to put this together, and I know that it keeps you from doing other things. And I hope that we can get to a point where we are able to help you in some of this and not just another thing that you have to do.
And to add to that, I'm wondering if you are going to ask us for help with the RFPs that are moving forward. So I think those of us on the commission were all sort of shocked that there weren't recommendations that came out of the organics plan that we could move forward on. It was a great plan. It got community involvement, no actionable items. That really felt like I don't know, almost a waste of money for many of us
opportunity.
here. So in your overworked state, will you be bringing these RFPs to us for
Well,
help?
I guess, and for the sake of time, and then realizing, and I mentioned early on, looking for input and discussion, but for the sake of time, perhaps if I could suggest to the chair and Matt, with the high-level items that's presented here, that's our starting point, and maybe ask if things could be directed and funneled through the chair and Matt to help us as staff to incorporating those certain aspects, because the key for us too is crafting that scope of work and to lay that out. It's that fine balance. We can't tell a consultant or a team literally what to do so that they're just rote repeating. We need to use their expertise, but yet we have to define it well enough so that we get the deliverables, the recommendations, the data, the input, whatever that is, so that it is what we need to move forward. So that was definitely our intention, and not that I'm surprised with the discussion, it's been great, but that was something we are definitely looking to have you folks already weigh in and participate. And to me, that's the huge value there, that we don't have any missteps and things, and that we're covering those. So perhaps if an electronic connection, perhaps over the next week or so, as we do the bureaucratic stuff of our format and things and pull that together, we'll certainly have time to take that input and build that into the detail of the scope.
I'm going to pop it over to you and just to ask, I know that we have more questions than we're going to be able to ask tonight, so if we could just have the most pressing ones asked, and then we will follow up and ask for. Commissioner Murphy?
I am mindful of the time, but I have a number of comments and questions, and frankly, I'd like to pose them in a public forum. So I'm going to proceed at least with some of them. I'll try to be brief, and if some of these can't be addressed this evening, then I'd like another opportunity that we are able to address them.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to express my thanks for all the city staff being here. I'd also like to thank people from the community being here. We've got several people that have sat through this entire meeting, made comments, and they're very much appreciated. I think they're a reflection of some of the concerns in the community. The Environmental Commission, as all commissions, we have an advisory role. But I think we also play another role, and that is to represent the concerns and the questions of residents and taxpayers. Reviews like this, in my view, help us hold up a mirror to ourselves to look at what we're doing, to be transparent, and hopefully to have lessons learned so that in the end we perform better. I think everybody in this room has the same values. I think everybody in this room wants to come to the same end where basically city government functions efficiently and effectively to achieve those values. But if you look at what we've been talking about tonight, if you look at the solid waste fund development, I'd like to challenge some of the comments made about what's responsible for that. I think there's certainly some big things in there that we all acknowledge. are related to accounting principles and requirements. That was the big jump in fiscal year 17. That's roughly $5.3 million, if I recall. But there's a lot of other things going on. And so really millions of dollars are at stake here. So I think it's really important that we address these issues either tonight or in another forum. And if I may, I'd like to continue. So first of all, I think we have an objective of having very high diversion rate goals. As far as I know, San Francisco has a diversion rate of over 80%. I know that it's a very expensive program that they have there, but I think they're around 83%. I've been told Los Angeles is approaching that. Countries in Europe are over 60%. Entire countries are over 60%. And they're continuing to make significant progress. There's reports that you can get online, and you can see progress just in the last 5 years. First of all, what is our diversion rate? Do you know what our diversion rate is in Ann Arbor?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but that's something we can certainly look up. But
so my understanding per the dashboard, 45 point something percent. It was roughly that in 13, and roughly that I think in 15. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a current figure. So we're certainly well below what is benchmark performance. As a community, Ann Arbor's demonstrably the smartest community in the United States, so hopefully we're not lacking for smarts. So if the right programs are in place and the right money is behind these programs, we should be able to do what Europe is doing countrywide or continent-wide, and what cities like San Francisco are doing. As far as the material composition, we saw that residuals are around 11%. My recollection is that's increased over what it had been in the past. I have a number about 7% in my head. Does that sound right? Does anybody remember?
I don't think so. I think it was 9%.
9? Okay,
and,
so
and
we're...
I think 10 to 11% is very much acceptable.
Okay, so that's where we've been at. Okay, so we haven't seen any degradation really. Yeah. Maybe a small shift from based on one data collection to another. Okay, that's fine. A couple of questions I wanted to pick up on comments from others. There was, we have a solid waste plan from 2013 through 2017. Since the end of 2017 is a matter of weeks away, shouldn't we have a draft solid waste plan ready for approval for 2018 for the next 5 years? Shouldn't that already be in place?
When we, as I forget if it was Commissioner Skinner or Hutton pointed out from the memo from the administrator, the goal and the direction was to be working on crafting that in the spring, and then the funding for the update is in this fiscal year, so that best laid plans,
when
yes.
one plan's run out, then there should be another plan that commences on January 1st of 2018,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So we won't have that plan in place.
Correct.
Okay. A couple of other questions. We had a comprehensive organics program study, and that pilot was never done. We also had a commercial recycling ordinance and a program that was created in 2010, but never fully implemented as far as I know. Is that correct?
I'm not sure which program in 2010, I'm sorry, I missed.
There was a commercial recycling ordinance that was passed, as I recall.
Yep. Commercial customers are supposed to be recycling. There's containers out there. Yep.
But is that fully implemented? It is.
Now.
Enforcement is
another matter.
Enforcement is the issue. So it is implemented, but it's not enforced.
It's not mandatory.
Okay. It's not. But
we don't have
ordinance. Was the ordinance mandatory? Was the ordinance not? Let's say voluntary.
Yeah.
Does anybody know?
I believe it's mandatory, but it comes down to enforcement. As with all ordinances, it's a matter of, it's the law, it's the requirement, but if someone's not following it, what are the consequences, and then how do we find who those people are and deal with their actions, their behaviors, so.
Okay. I have a request related to the solid waste fund balance. And that is that we've agreed with the administrator in a meeting like in April that we would continue to get regular updates. My request is that those updates also show the 2 prior forecasts so that we can see not just a snapshot and we have to scratch our head and think, what did it look like 6 months ago and what did it look like a year ago, but what did it look like and what changed from one forecast to the other forecast. Again, so that we are transparent, so that we're holding up a mirror, and so that we're learning in the process. And with those lines, ideally, there'd be some explanation, or with those plots, of what the changes were. What are the deltas from the one plan to the next? Because then I think we really understand, here was a forecast where it dropped like this, and now there's another forecast where it drops like that, and that is because the commodity rates have dropped from X to Y, or whatever the case, or there was an accounting charge, or whatever it was. So we see very clearly, not only for ourselves, but again for the community at large, what is going on with recycling and with solid waste in Ann Arbor. And we're looking at, you can look at the chart. It was several years where it was in the $12 to $14 million range, and now all of a sudden it's taking a nosedive. And I think, again, residents and taxpayers and we deserve to understand why that's happening. Again, half of that probably is due to this accounting change, but I'd really like to understand what else is going on. And then, I guess finally, I'd like to challenge us to rethink one more time the point that's been made, seconded, third, and now fourth, and that is the relationship between resources and the development in the solid waste fund, but also other things. So first of all, it was my understanding that at one time the city had roughly 4 FTEs that had decades of experience in solid waste management. It doesn't look like it from the chart, but at least my understanding is that there were more resources than that, and maybe that was bad memory or information that I got from other people that maybe wasn't correct, but there's a few other people that are nodding in agreement.
If you look back to like 2000, starting in
maybe
like
maybe
2000.
prior to the economic downturn, loss of Pfizer and everything else like that. But basically what I'm saying is going from roughly, let's say 4 down to 1.5, I'd just like us to think about what maybe the correlation is. And I think there is a correlation because we've heard indeed from both you and Mr. Huppy that staffing limitations or resources have been a bottleneck in multiple cases. So we had a Murph investment that the city had that I believe is roughly $5 million in value, both the facility and all the equipment and everything else. Does that sound right?
Now or when it began?
No, when it began.
Yeah.
What,
10 million.
10 million. So we have a $10 million asset that is not operated and hasn't been operational for quite some time. We have an increase in operating costs, higher shipping, lower recovery rates, whether it's $30,000 a month or $30,000 a year, we need to know what that is. That's a factor 10 difference. That's not 10% difference, that's a factor of 12 difference. So that's big money. We've had significant one-time costs, $200,000 plus $25,000 at least additional for repair of the conveyor. We have, even if maybe minor things like CNG refueling, if we would have had a facility here right where we were using it all the time instead of having to go somewhere else, all of these things, in my view, are traceable to the fact that we haven't been able to implement the organics program. We haven't really been able to audit the commercial recycling. We haven't been able to do all these other things. I know many of these decisions are made from the top, and the questions, who do we need to pose these questions to? All of us in this room, including all of you, I think we have to think about, have we made the right decisions? And in light of that, are we making the right decisions going forward? And with that, I'll end, but my belief is that there should be lessons learned from what we've done, and we can do better going forward. And I believe that having the right resources, whether they're full-time employees or engaging consultants, maybe at a higher one-time cost, but then we don't have permanent staff, that would make sense. I really think we should re-examine that, and I pledge to talk to the administrator in my role, but I encourage everybody in the room also to talk to their management, to talk to their council people and everything else, because we're not doing as well as what we can do in Ann Arbor. I'm convinced of it. Thank you.
I know we have more questions, but I'm going to say that to thank you very much for coming, for answering all of our questions, and just to say that I think that we all want to fix this. And, you know, I know that you're the one who's standing here and you're listening to us say all of these things. But
We're right there too.
Agreed.
Yep, that's our goal as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the other staff who also came. Yep, coming up. All right, I am going to just jump to the resolution. And I wonder if there are significant changes that happened in the amendment between when you presented to us in July and what we're looking at now?
No.
No.
There have not been.
Okay.
Just minor grammatical.
Okay, all right. Is there any discussion about the resolution? We have before us a resolution to recommend the amended solid waste management plan resolution, amended solid waste management plan to City Council. Is there a motion to, sorry, I'm losing my words here. Motion to consider the question of adopting the resolution?
So moved.
Commissioner Skinner, second. Commissioner Needham, all in favor? Aye.
Discussion though, right? Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
can I ask
Yeah.
more discussion?
Are we taking a vote on it, or are we discussing now? Sorry.
I asked for discussion.
Okay, okay. My request would be that, at least maybe I didn't do my homework, but I don't think that was the case, that I would like to look at this, and I would also like to look at the summary that was presented last night, apparently per the presentation that Preston Slaughton gave, before we vote endorsing this. That's my recommendation.
Well, we did hear that we were presented this plan in July, so this is not.
This one right here.
Well.
That's the executive
This is the
summary.
summary.
That's not the whole plan.
Okay.
So this is not new information to the commission, unless I'm misremembering.
I think the executive summary is new.
Yes.
But we received the presentation on the whole
I think
thing.
it's my first meeting. Right?
Was it? Could be.
Yeah.
So I've read that, this is the Washtenaw County one that's on the Washtenaw County site too, right?
Correct.
That's the full 150 pages or whatever, right?
Correct, right.
Okay.
It's mandated by the state of Michigan, by the way.
So this is not a resolution related to the proposal that was looking at the county-wide activity. This is just the county
Plan.
solid waste plan.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
Yep.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Is there other
And
discussion?
it needs our approval because,
Well, we have to go to all 28 municipalities for a resolution to approve our solid
so
waste
that's part
plan.
of your process, that you're required to come here.
We would like the Environmental Commission to recommend it to City Council for their approval.
Very good.
Other discussion?
Call a question.
All right, let's go back. Is there a motion to consider the question of
You have a
adopting the
motion.
resolution?
Call a question, you
Okay.
can vote.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else here like to give public comment this evening? All All right, then I am going to adjourn us at 9:16. Our next meeting is January 25th, I believe. And I look forward to resuming this conversation then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Susan.